Hi everyone, I'm Diana Paredes. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Suede. It's a pleasure to be invited to take part in this conversation. I would like to kind of share with you, as part of this presentation, basically an industry perspective of what we do at Suede and how we're seeing artificial intelligence and machine learning being used to increase the capacities of supervisors and central bankers in a way to actually have better access to financial data of the industry and overall for the greater good of society, because obviously a stable financial system means a stable society as well. And so I'll take you on a bit of this adventure out of like reimagining finance by leveraging of what we would like to call agile regulation technology, and introduce the concept as part of this conversation. Basically, this is an opportunity, right? When you think of what's been happening over the past 2 years, it is a reality that COVID has been, obviously devastating in so many ways. But at the same time, it's also demonstrated the capability that we have as a society globally to act and to make things more efficient, or to actually, make big global decisions. Which is basically what has happened with COVID. It's been a very big coordinated effort around the world. And so this coordinated effort in many ways is an opportunity to be inspired and to really give us an opportunity to building back the world in a better way than what we had before. And obviously our focus at Suede has always been around, a better world. So we've been focusing on producing, reporting, analytics, calculations that are usually the things that you send back to the regulator. We've been able to actually work very strongly on data standards in a way that has really taken the conversation forward when it's come to digital regulatory reporting. And so in many ways, a lot of our work has been very much driven by the reality that, there was a financial crisis. This is a health crisis, but it's a crisis nonetheless. There was a financial crisis in 2008, and we saw that there was an opportunity to use that crisis as a way to do something for the better. And so in many ways, the regulation that came since 2008 on the back of that crisis has only tried to help the industry to become safer and more stable. And so regulation in many ways for us as a RegTech, who basically, breathe regulation, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, has really been for us a way to open up opportunities and open up the data of the industry. And we almost take advantage of the regulation as a way to free up the data of financial services, and a way to leverage of the regulation as a way to allow financial services to have better analytics of what they're doing through the realities of what they have to be submitting. And so when you bring this back to the opportunities around COVID, there is a reality that what we have learned now that around this coordinated effort is that firms really are putting digital innovation first. And in financial services, the reality of trying to be more agile, respond quickly during the COVID situation, the central banks actually asked for a lot more faster responses, stressing scenarios to really understand the situation, whether they had in their hands not just a health crisis but also a financial crisis. And so all of this has, really put digital revolution and digital transformation at the forefront of, everyone's board's conversation, not just in finance, of course, but across the, different industries. But when it comes to finance, in many ways, what we have experienced is that, regulation has allowed for innovation, but really now with COVID, it's almost opening the conversation to really make the digital shift that you would want to happen in the industry a lot more accelerated and faster. And so RegTech in many ways is very much in the spirit of bringing new technology in the financial services. So RegTech is really, enterprise software innovation in many ways. And what you find here is that one of the things that we feel very strongly about is that when it comes to RegTech and innovation is that you really need to have accessible data. And we have been working, as I mentioned before, on data standards for most of the work we have been doing in the industry. And data standards is something that we think is essential when it comes to accessibility of data in the financial industry. And the reason for that is because standards actually make software possible. And in the fintech space, you can you have examples, you have plenty of examples that actually have demonstrated that by having good access to your data, it's the only way to really understand, patterns from your customers, behaviors in society, but also to understand where you are at risk as a financial institution. And so when we think of RegTech, or when we speak about RegTech and the RegTech revolution, it's very much about also coming from the right perspective around implementing new technology. New technology very much advocates approaches of open architecture and interoperability, and access to data, right? Which is basically what we think is quite important. And that access to data really comes from standardization and for an approach that really allows for better technology to be built. And, if you, for example, combine that, thinking with credit evaluation tools, you could really end up in a position where an individual's behavior could even be, analyzed or even maybe influenced in the amount of spending or saving recommendation that can come from their banks. So I think that this is also why you want this access to data, but you want to also make sure that in some ways it is regulated quite carefully, because you don't want to be in a situation where people are leveraging off that data to just sell more products rather than actually help customers and help the economy. And so you can see a bit the conversation of access to data and the open data piece being a recurring theme, in financial services. On the GDPR, for example, in the European Union, processes, for example, demonstrated they cannot really be entirely automated. So you kind of have this approach of, regulation that comes out, but fundamentally, to get access to data, to regulate the data in an efficient way, you really have to understand the detail of what's going on. And so then, you take it a step back. So this kind of access to data is very much all about automation, is very much about the realities of artificial intelligence and how can we leverage of machine learning and NLP. And to be able to train models, you need that access to data, because it's how you actually, get models trained to do what you want. And so that access to data has that importance, not just because it allows you to create good technology, but also because it allows you to really work in the frontiers of what technology has to offer financial services. And so, there are obviously bits of legislation here and there as the industry adopts more uses of natural language processing, of machine learning. You start becoming closer and closer to a world where artificial intelligence use cases become very real. And again, this is where the concept of, agile regulation starts being introduced, because as you see very quickly, from RegTech, which is basically about innovation and enterprise software in the financial industry, you end up in a conversation of accessibility to data that then can go and train models for artificial intelligence purposes. So then you start being into a world of artificial intelligence that also really needs to be regulated and observed much more closely. And if you think, for example, GDPR as an example of regulation that was efficient and coordinated in some ways, but also really missed the mark, I think, in a lot of the realities about implementation that it required for SMEs and for startups and for scale-ups and for smaller tech companies, when really the target of GDPR was more for the large tech companies. So this is why, to give this access to data, to really work efficiently on data standards, to really be able to speak about, NLP and artificial intelligence, you really need to introduce this concept of agile regulation. So where regulation doesn't miss the mark, but it actually really hits the mark in terms of balancing out innovation, but also good for society. So, there's also a reality. So this is the concept of agile governance that I was introducing. I was actually presenting this at the World Economic Forum in the last World Economic Forum that was in person since COVID. And obviously we're hoping that this will happen again very soon. But there is a reality that, our work has been used, right, as an example of positive change and of leveraging of natural language processing to fundamentally turn regulation into code. And so this reality around agile governance, which is actually something that the World Economic Forum speaks about a lot, and I'm part of the council for it, is very much entrenched in some ways for RegTech, not just for the financial industry, but this kind of concept of RegTech, in different sectors as well. And so it is the reality of regulatory technology, of also how regulators leverage technology, and not just how the industry leverages technology. And for all of this adoption of technology to be efficient, this agile regulation is very much a reality and a requirement. And that means that the regulators themselves, or supervisors themselves, the people who create the regulation, need to really understand how to make the regulation as efficient as possible, or being able to do minimum viable products in the regulation, implement them, take feedback from the industry, and very much operate like a startup themselves. So that's the concept of agile governance. So I'd kind of wrap up here in terms of, the realities that we think that in many ways to have this world, not be an utopia of artificial intelligence, but really a reality, we really need to get to a reality of freedom of information, so where data can actually travel freely, and in a way that is balanced as well with something that does not jeopardize the good of the economy, the good of the individuals. And to get to that point of freedom of information that really allows innovation and technology to evolve, you also need this concept of agile regulation, where the technologies can be regulated, but they are regulated in a way that's agile and that does not prevent innovation, because of the understanding in the depth of the analysis as well that's required to create efficient regulation. So thank you very much for this. I'll leave you with these thoughts. Great to be part of this conference, as I mentioned. And if you need anything on the regulatory reporting side, analytics or calculations in the financial industry, here we are. Thank you very much.